Alrighty, welcome to the 24th episode of Magus Talk. Today we're going to get into Jay's summoning of the Jinn called Baal in this system. This episode involves a progression. So we're summoning the first Jinn of the Shem Hamafarash from the Lesser Key of Solomon. This Jinn is called Baal. It is the day Jinn of the first Decan of our zodiac circle, which we can call it the Ring of Solomon. This is the true Ring of Solomon, at least as far as this approach is concerned. So Jay had summoned this before, and you'll see the progression of difficulties, where the mistakes are made, corrections, and in the final case, which was a belated communication from Jay that came about a week later, where he tried it again. And I was just about to post this when I got that. And it's being re-recorded with new insights. And this time you will be able to see the progression and how it works. And I'll explain the system in greater detail without going too long into it. So without further ado, take it away, Jay.
Alrighty then. Hello, Ari, Tara, once again, it's me. Hello, everybody. So, the summoning of Baal. Here's how that went down. I tried twice in the same day. I went through. It's kind of. I think I'm doing like, a little more than I really need to, and anyway, this goes along with when Ari, you mentioned that you should do this kind of stuff like at least 2 days a week, and I like to do it more than that, but you want to read and understand all these things before you just try and, just do it when you don't really know what's going on. But with the whole organ fusion and 9 cuts beforehand, that takes up a lot of time. So the whole thing could last over an hour. But anyway, I also like to do it too. So it's fun, but it's like, I also have other things to do. So anyway, I go through the whole process of the 9 cuts and the organ fusion, and then I summon Baal, and the whole thing, it just fell flat again. And I was like, damn it. So anyway, this is, everything worked up to the angel of the Shimham Farash. I got that, same feeling in my heart. But the summoning fell flat, and I paid attention to the Two of Swords and what the Two of Swords is all about, how that relates to the angel and the Jinn, and how you balance that, the relationship of the angel and the Jinn out. It's gonna be it's gonna be weird because this is the first time. Did all that, but it didn't work.
Before I get into the description of Jay's process, let me just, in a nutshell, explain really quickly what's going on here. The first thing you do is you set up the Ring of Solomon, which is the circle. And this ring gives you the power to summon these entities and so-called command them. Now, this is a modified dynamic in this system where we don't just bring them in to command them for whatever. We're going back to the original myth. And these myths are narratives. They're narratives of esoteric possibility. They're allegories in most cases. So we have the Temple of Solomon. And the Temple of Solomon was built by these entities. Now, these entities are there. Why didn't the angels build the Temple of Solomon? Because they represent pure consciousness. They cannot do that. That's not in their purview. Plus, the Temple of Solomon is the human spatial body. It's the human connection to the environment. Let's put it that way. And it's what you might call a subtle body, a subtle influence. Just like the mind can be called the mental body, the emotions can be called an emotional body. This connects the emotions, mental processes, but feelings and sensations, everything that's going on in your subjective sphere, connecting to the environment. And once it becomes coherent and clear, it can influence the environment. So, this is the way you not only cultivate what you might call psychic abilities, but the ability to influence events. Uh, and it's what might be called magical ability. And in ancient civilizations, you would have prophetic ability, divinatory ability would be prominent. Uh, the ability to bless, the ability to curse, the ability to heal, all of these things and many more are associated with the activated and awakened subtle body. So the allegory here is this is the temple of the soul, the temple of the deeper subject individuality. And in order to awaken this, you can do it on your own cultivational effort, like they do in India, for example, or in Taoist practices. But there originally, since everything comes from shamanism, they did use spirits. In Indian systems, you do have the four directions, the cardinal directions. They have their guardians because you don't want environmental influences messing with your process. So you kind of have to filter things out. In Western magic, you have this thing called banishing rituals, where they kind of clean out the space. Now, this is something that's more organic. We're going into the basic myth, and we're interpreting the lesser key of Solomon, not the magical ritual process, but the symbolism of its description. So this book called the Lemegeton, the Little Key, has its first part gives you 72 jinn, 72 spirits that Christian fundamentalists would call demons, but they're not. They're not. They're very different. So let me get quickly into the allegory of the lamp. A human being is like a lamp. The body is the container of the lamp, and this is where the genie story of the lamp came from. That is an allegory. These are Sufi tales. These are tales of wise people that became compiled and were told as regular stories or so-called fairy tales. But they are actually shamanic teachings in disguise. So the lamp is essentially a the body, the fuel of the lamp, the oil is your life force, the wick is the mind, so or the nervous system, the material mind, and the when it's ignited, when the wick ignites and burns, you have the flame. Now the flame has two components. It's the heat and the visible part, anything that's tangible from the flame in terms of what it does to you, and then there's the part that you see, the light. You can separate. In essence, they're the same thing in our perception, but and in physics, of course, the heat is a form of light, and in here too. So you have energy beings representing the heat part of the flame, smokeless fire. The light part, the pure luminosity, is the consciousness. It's not the heat, it's just the pure luminosity. And so you might say angels are represented by the light part, jinn and other more terrestrially bound spirits by the heat and the flame form, and then you have the human element. So what we're doing here is we're rubbing the lamp. When you rub the lamp, you cause it to shine. When you cause it to shine in terms of the energy body, you activate it, you energize it. You're actually, because bronze, for example, in Hebrew was also the same, where it's the shining metal, brass. All of this tells you that these spirits, you don't go outside of yourself to summon them from somewhere else. You are the medium where they come through. It's just that they do not possess you. You retain all of your faculties and you harness them to build the inner temple of a structured, matured, cultivated energy body through which then you can interface with the physical and all of the realms, the mental, the emotional, everything in your environment, and connected with your being. So the jinn essentially are catalysts, and they work best when coupled with angels in the same way that you cannot really separate the light of a lamp from its heat and flame form. This is where religion creates an artificial conflict, and then esoteric practices in the Middle Ages and the late and antique period, so to speak, these practices would also emphasize this kind of antagonism between angels and jinn. The antagonism is not supposed to exist because jinn are not fallen beings. They are part of they're like fairies, they're like nature spirits. Only they're of a different type of nature spirit. They don't just come from nature, they evolve with humanity. They're supposed to be symbiotic with humans. That's why many of them take on the characteristics of demigods or heroic mythological figures. Others take on the characteristics of human traits that are collectively spread. Ashmadeva or Asmodee, it's a devolved form, the base instincts, the primitive rage, all of these things that this being is associated with is a corrupted version of what this later Asmodee is, which is a more evolved version. This is why we bring in the angels. The angels are brought in to channel a corresponding level of consciousness as if they were the higher selves of these jinn. And together, they symbiotically bond with the humans. So we're not supposed to just bond with them and bring them in or consume them. They provide copies of themselves, you might say. And these copies are called familiars. And this is a process that I call familiarization. So as you move through the zodiac wheel, which represents the temporal progression of any cycle of becoming for a human being, and the cycles of nature and the cycles of human existence and all of this. This is like a primary vibration. So you take one cycle, you split it into 12 parts, and then you modify those parts accordingly as subtle body experiences. Then you combine all of that with the entities that are compatible with them. And all of this is synchronistic. I mean, I didn't make any of this up. All I'm doing is taking the parts and aligning them and finding out which correspondences work the best in accordance with a reference frame coming from an ancient manual that became the foundation for Kabbalistic philosophy. And this is called the Sefer Yetzirah, or the Book of Creation. Now, this Book of Creation can also be translated, the Sefer Yetzirah can be translated, the title, as a manual of shaping, or a manual of fashioning. So it's basically a manual that teaches you, and it actually activates the dynamics of the inner temple. And that's its metaphor, because there's some of its processes are known as the inner court of the temple, and the other processes are known as the outer court of the temple. So it is meant to be applied in this way, so it is compatible with Solomonic magic, which uses the same symbolism. And I realized that this is the key. You can do all of these other rituals that come in that borrow from here and there, because they had the key, but they didn't recognize it, because by the time they picked it up, Europeans, and even in Judaism, the Sefer Yetzirah had been edited and re-edited with commentaries and additional interpretations, and then the interpretations become part of the text, and so you had a completely different, it was the same text, but it was embellished in a way that took out the esoteric process. There was very little in the text that actually pertained to inner alchemy, whereas from my perspective, all of it is for inner alchemy. So there was a researcher named A. Peter Heyman, around 2004, wrote a book about the earliest reconstruction of the Sefer Yetzirah, where he took a series of editions, some new, some old, some long, some short, and found the common points in them, and said, well, if you take the common points, then you can wipe out a lot of the additional commentary. You don't go back to an original, but at least you can scale it back to something where it was closer to what it was originally intended to be. And he says, well, this is not accredited official text. We can't do this because I'm just coming off of the hypothesis that there are no other distortions or whatever in the text. It's just this. That doesn't matter. If you filter out a whole bunch of editings, you get a much clearer picture. And so the text becomes leaner, meaner, simpler, and more easy to understand. But also, for somebody with 40 years of meditation experience and yoga and alchemy, you understand what the author was trying to say with their metaphors, their imagery, their allegory. It's kind of makes sense, much more sense, whereas the other religious elaborations didn't. Now, I'm just going to leave it there because from then on, we structure the Ring of Solomon. We structure the zodiac wheel. So you have the 12 signs, and each of these signs has 3 decans. That's a 10-degree arc from the word deca, which is the Greek word for 10. Each of these decans has a day side and a night side. So you have a total of 36 decans and 72 day-night pairs, or 72 segments, basically. So you can stick these 72 jinn around the zodiac wheel, but also Kabbalah has a certain decoding where 72 angels that are portions or aspects or harmonics, you might say, lesser harmonics, of the angel that led the Israelites out of Egypt and across the Red Sea. Some say it was Michael. Well, we use Michael for other things here, but others say it's the archangel, the angel Metatron. And that is plausible because Metatron is the angel that's supposed to be closest to God, but at the same time comes from a human being. It's an evolutionary or a spiritualization of human possibility where it doesn't merge with the divine, but it's the closest possible association while still retaining independent consciousness. So it's basically the highest self of human potential in the face of the divine as far as monolatric religion or monotheistic religion can take it. It's not the mystical union of India, for example, or other systems. So in this case, you do have a portioning of this higher self into independent beings that then become an example of human potential for the jinn. Because the jinn are also part of human potential. I believe they're fragments of lost human potential. Maybe it wasn't lost. Maybe it needs to be evolved into. And these jinn are much happier when they're connected with human beings. And if human beings freak out at them, they become exposed to other influences, the true fallen consciousness, which is demonic, which is malignant, malevolent, that corrupts them. So they become as possessed as humans with a compromised immune system can become possessed. Now, where does Jay's thing come in? Well, let me get into his process now. So he begins summoning Baal by first doing the 4 cardinal points. And I connect all of this with the tarot cards because that symbolism seems to describe everything in a nutshell. It has the elements, it has the numbers, which are associated with the 10 Sephiroth or stages of cultivation of the tree of life, and it has the zodiac correspondences as well. So you don't have to go into astrological meanings because the Rider-Waite deck, this tarot deck, happens to have interpretations that are Kabbalistically compatible. So it's far easier to get into the meanings. And that's what you want to do. You want to essentially embody the meanings in your awareness and get into the energetic sensation of what the symbolism is. This becomes a tangible vibration of your awareness that has real effects. And it also stimulates your own being to establish structures, psychic structures that correspond to structures of this inner temple. Now, let me get to the nitty-gritty. I already talked about the 4 archangels connected to the 4 rulers of the cardinal quarters or directions. So you have a sky element, a light element connected to an earth element, which is energetic. It's not physical. And bonding these two together happens through the human intermediary. There is no substitute for the human intermediary. So once you can do that, this also allows you to have the basic experience to do it in smaller portions. For example, you have the first angel of the Shem HaMephorash, Vahaval, is coupled with Baal, which is the first jinn. Now, I have, you might say, restructured these things because the angels themselves are supposed to start at 0 degrees of the sign of Aries, which is the sign of the tropical vernal equinox. But according to the Lesser Key of Solomon, we're actually starting from 0 degrees of the sign of Cancer. This is from a certain seal that's supposed to be at the cap of the vessel containing the jinn. Now, the vessel is again a vessel of brass. This is the lamp. So at the cap of the lamp, sealing it and defining it is, and through this you command the jinn. So this is the basic mapping. And the mapping depicts an individual, a caricature of an individual, and it shows the one side of the head has a certain planetary symbolism, the other side of the head has another astrological symbolism. And they basically tell you, well, this is the right side and that's the left side, the male side, the female side. And then they tell you surrounding it is a ring of other symbols, which are the astrological signs. These are like scribbles. You can't really tell what's what, except for the sign of Pisces, which is at the top. And then it tells you, well, you have to do this in order to create this seal. You have to do this on midnight. It's in autumn, close to the vernal equinox, when the sun is in Virgo, and the moon has to be waxing, increasing. So you do this and you go, oh, that's when Cancer's in the east and Capricorn's in the west and Pisces is on, and Aries is on top. In the sidereal astrological version, Pisces is on top. So there's leeway there. You can use either way. I'm using the tropical version because that is more bounded to the planet, to the seasons. It's not so much celestial, and we're trying to ground here. Also, the tropical version is simpler. Most people know it, and we can relate to it better. The other version, the sidereal version, changes the symbols a little bit, but represents a kind of more advanced state, something where you actually have mastered the jinn and the angels, and they can work for you. So if you work that, it's a further step. This is the step of initiation. And Jay has successfully done the quarters, the archangels and the angels. He successfully managed to tune into the angels because they have a very similar resonance to the archangels. But then the jinn somehow falls flat because maybe he put too much emphasis on the angel. But looking back, I see that he hasn't quite followed the procedure. There is a procedure here. And this procedure is not the ritual one. You don't do prayers, you don't light the incense, you don't have to do any of that. What you need to do is translate the symbolism in a way where you can work with it on your own. You're sitting there meditating cross-legged or sitting in a chair, and everything is not in your head, but your consciousness and your awareness. So you're doing an energy body, and you don't need to be ritually dependent. There is a procedure that is somewhat ritualized, and this is bare bones. So this is more like it's not so ceremonial. It's very less, and you don't have to do it at a specific time. You don't have to do it at a specific day. You don't have to get everything just right. You can make mistakes and go back and correct them. That's the organic, messy process that's how it's supposed to work, because nothing is going to attack you because you're actually following the symbology, the mythology, the narrative. And this is a kind of agreement with the jinn themselves and the angels. Everything comes into harmony. So Baal and all the jinn are summoned through what they call the triangle of summoning, which has a circle. And the circle is usually colored black because it's to see the jinn inside of it. This is also an allegory, however, or a symbol for the third eye, for the mind's eye, because you have the eye at the top of the pyramid. The capstone is a triangle with an eye in the middle of it. This is very similar to that. So this isn't Masonic symbolism, but it's actually very ancient symbolism. Egyptian symbolism, or Middle Eastern symbolism, ancient Middle Eastern symbolism, from which all of this came from. when you do this, the triangle itself is meant to be, it has a certain coded words that are distortions of actual Hebrew words or Greek words, Greek and Hebrew combinations, and my interpretation of it, my rendering of it, many people have their own views. It gives you a phrase, and it tells you essentially that the Tetragrammaton is the revelation, is the backing, the divine backing of the energy body. So it kind of blesses the energy body. So you're grounded. It grounds your third eye into the more tangible energy sensations of the subtle frame. And that's the outside of the triangle. On the inside of the triangle, you have an angelic name, and it's a generic name of Archangel Michael, which is the protecting angel, the angel of Israel, and all of that. However, in this case, the real angel name, if you want it to work for individual Jim, is the angel of the Shema Farash, because the text of the Lesser Key of Solomon doesn't tell you where you put these Shem Farash angels. It just tells you that, well, they're there. You don't use Jinn names for Shem Farash. That thing is an angelic or divine dynamic. So you're either going to have some kind of God name or you're going to have an angelic name. And already in Cornelius Agrippa's Magical Philosophy, his works, you did have, and other works, you did have these angels explained. So they were a thing. And then you had people experimenting with them, but usually the angel is supposed to be like the policing the jinn to keep it from doing whatever, controlling it, negating it, punishing it. In this case, it actually protects the jinn from influences that would corrupt it, and then you'd get a bad experience. So with the jinn around it, then the actual seal of the angel isn't what's visualized. What's visualized is the description. Now, Jay finally gets this toward the end after I had sent him some emails before I even recorded this, so he was working with it. But he's going to do a second attempt now, and he'll tell you what his progress is there. So take it away, Jay, again.
I went ahead that same day and did another summoning, but without all the other stuff. I just went straight into the summoning. And, summon the archangels and the rulers like I always do, and, had the cards and how they play into the story. But before I summoned or tried to summon them the second time, I focused on, and this is something on the side that you talked about, Ari, but I think you've talked about it in podcasts as well. Ball comes in as a toad, a human, and a cat. And let me back this up a little bit. After I summoned Ball the first time, and it didn't work, I was like, "Come on, man! What's the deal? What's going on?" And so, like, I'm asking the angel, and the response was, this is kind of cool. Not cool, just it sparks a question. Because you said, okay, talk to the angel, don't ask the demon. So I asked, what's going on? So I got visions, but they were typical. I mean, they were in genie colors. Now that's what I call it. So it's like the colors I get my visions in when I know absolutely they're coming from familiars or the jinn is usually black and red, or sometimes the color is black and blue. But this time it was black and red. But there were also some real-time TV, not real-time, but just real, like in living color kind of visions, where it was just like watching TV. It would flip back and forth. And so anyway, the visions were, this first vision was of a familiar of mine riding in this big fish, bird kind of contraption. It wasn't a contraption, it was an animal. And it looked like a fish. It was kind of swimming like a fish, but it was flapping its fins like a bird. Okay? And so I'm looking at this going, oh, all right, okay. So I took the vision later. Well, hang on, let me tell you about the other two. Then there was like kind of a chase scene vision where, it's this first person riding a motorcycle. And again, this is not a dream, everybody. These are visions, all right? And everything's really wet. And this is where it starts to flip back and forth between TV and vision mode. And I don't know how to explain that. Visions are not cartoons for me, but they just have their own look. But I have, from time to time, had just flashes of just like what I would see out of my own eyes. And so this vision would go back and forth, mostly vision mode, but there was just that real eye view as well, where it's like, okay, this is an attention getter for me. Now, these visions did not rival the visions I had back with the rulers. If you guys remember when I brought in the rulers on some kind of full moon night or something. I think Ari I'm sure you'll remind everybody of that. And I was smoking marijuana, which is legal in Colorado, which is where I was. And I was not drinking any alcohol at all. It was just pretty much just marijuana. And it wasn't the best marijuana in the world. It wasn't low grade. But anyway, it may have had a little bit to do with the visions, but no, but anyway, those visions were of another greater category. These are kind of scaled down a little bit. But anyway, in this chase scene, there was a lot of water on the street. Okay? And then the other vision I had, it was just a water kind of theme. So I'm like going, okay, all right. So this next time, just a few hours later, I decided to do just the summoning part again, because that doesn't take too long. And actually, I think it took a little over an hour, though. But anyway, I meditated on what I was going to say earlier was you've got the toad, the human, and then the cat. And the cat represents fire, and the toad represents water, the human air. And and Ari suggested this to, think of it as there's only one way to do this, though, but there are other ways that you could look at ball. But anyway, this kind of way I think fits me. Is just put it as a totem pole. So the cat will be on the top, the human would be in the center, and then the toad will be at the bottom. And then again, Ari, you wrote this, and so this is what I did. Ball favors the disputer. How about switching the toad and the cat? Then that way you've got fire at the bottom, water at the top, and air in between, and you can create kind of a steam engine that way. So, I don't know. I don't think I'm all that super good at this kind of thing, but I mean, for me, it's not that big of a deal. Just, meditate on fire in your belly and water in your head, and then, that's it. So again, I may be underestimating the profoundness of this type of meditation, Ari. I would be critical if you can, because I want to know, for me, it's like, no big deal. I can do that. And so I did that. Now, I don't know to what extent I did it. Like I said, I don't, I may be good at this kind of thing. I'm not really sure. I've never done it before. But anyway, I did it, and it was enough to get Ball's attention. So that worked. Now, I could definitely, the second summoning, I could definitely feel the genie energy. And it wasn't all that much, or it wasn't all that different from the rulers and the archangels. And I'm not I can sense when a genie is around, but usually it's from the pattern of things, not the energy. And so this was like the first time where it's like, okay, now I'm all right. He's got the same ruler kind of energy. It's dark. I guess I've always felt that, but it's like because I've never summoned anything else other than a genie. That's just okay. That's what I'm. It's the only thing I know is that dark energy. So maybe it was, just the newness of being able to feel into a genie and an angel at the same time, and understanding where the darkness is coming from. A lot's happening over here, and it's kind of hard to put into words. But anyway, I did feel the presence. And so used to when I would summon genies, like I remember Furcus felt like a manhole, or not a manhole, but a manhole cover. Those big iron plate things that go over the holes in the streets. Just felt like a manhole cover just on my chest. It was like, that's what the genie energy felt like to me at first, years ago, back in 2008. Now, so anyway, I'm feeling that dark energy. I even made a seal with a circle on it, and Vahavil's name around it, and the seal also, his name's written in black, but the colors around the circle, I colored it yellow. It's got kind of a cool gold look to it, and then Baal's sigil is in the middle, and so that's kind of what I'm working. It's a pretty big sigil too, and I put it on my chest, and then I felt that energy in my chest, and also slept with the thing on my chest as well. And before I would go to sleep, it felt heavy. And even now, I kind of feel just a wee bit heavy in the chest, in the heart area. So anyway, that's what I got. Now, there were no profound dreams when I went to sleep. I expected them, but I didn't get them. But I don't know if they're really necessary. Because, hey, I felt the energy. That's what I was looking for. I can sustain it. That's what I was looking for. So, I kind of feel it with me right now. So, I'm thinking, move to Agaraz and see what happens. So, that's what I'm going to do as of now. Yeah. Other things. I just wanted to say that the second time I summoned Baal, there was I could just sense a lot of unhappiness, very unhappy vampires surrounding me, going through things that may not be good for them, but it may not be good, but, not everything somebody needs to go through is always good.
Well, that was where Jay's communication ended. And then he sent me another communication where he did move into summoning Baal with my full recommendations and suggestions. Point is that this summoning brought in the Jinn to a certain degree. Even the first summoning where it fell flat, the Jinn was there, but he couldn't ground it into his being. And the angel was too loud also. So this is a balancing of energies. And before I go on, I'd like to also say that the tarot play a large role, as I said. The major arcana substitute for planets and signs. The minor arcana, not the court cards, and not the aces, which deal with the four quarters, but the numbered cards from 2 to 10. And there are 36 of them, and they align perfectly with the four elements. And these number cards, each card describes the characteristics of a specific Decan. You would have to look at Egyptian mythology, Greek mythology, and then they vary. There's some sigils online that come from ancient Byzantine sources, but they're partial. So the best thing is to look at it synchronistically that the minor arcana cards actually have characteristics of these decans. The first card that we deal with is the Two of Swords, and this card represents the first decan, and it because Cancer is identified with the High Priestess card. This is my symbology. I take it from an interpretation of the Sefer Yetzirah, applying Hebrew letters to astrological signs and then the corresponding Hebrew letters to tarot cards. So you can take it with a grain of salt, but it works here because the synchronicities align. Let's put it this way. The High Priestess card, in the background, it has a veil. The high priestess is focusing inward into the center of the temple to the observer, not outside. And behind her is the world, and the general depiction of the environment is as an ocean, as a sea. And the sea has a horizon. And you only see the edges of it behind the veil. Once the veil of the divine feminine is removed, then you encounter the environment um, of the Two of Swords. And this environment is very similar because it's nighttime. It's the moon, instead of being at the lunar crescent, instead of being at the feet of the high priestess, it is now in the sky. So the inner world of the temple is corresponding to the outer world. You're aligned in that sense, in that lunar dynamic, representing the emotions, the subconscious, the sensate, deeper nature, the lower astral plane, so to speak. Not necessarily the lower one, but there. And it's accessible to human nature. It's something like a first step, so to speak. In any case, um, there are in the Two of Swords. This is the first contact with the environment, and it is one. The ocean represents the sea of energy. The sky represents the expanded consciousness, and here at the lunar level. Now, a woman in the card is blindfolded. She has the two swords and she's balancing them. And behind her, the sea has rocks. So you got to navigate the rocks, but it's not easy because you're blindfolded. You can't use your physical eyes. You need to use your intuition, your inner sense to navigate these energies. Also, you're dealing with fine tuned balances. So this teaches us that, okay, to navigate this Decan, we are learning now to balance the jinn and the angels. This is our first experience, our initiation. The word Baal stems from a Hebrew root, as far as I understand it, which means to enter. It has to do with entrance. So there's no coincidence that it's there. It's a jinn of rank king, which means that it's a solar type jinn. It means that it has its own intelligence. It doesn't revolve around other factors, for example. It's not specialized. It's basically an identity. And it's a very fundamental identity. And we will see why, when Jay says at the end that certain vampires are uncomfortable, well, there's a reason for that. And we'll get to this reason after he gives us our next installment. So I'm going to just go straight to that now. I've already described the process. I'm going to give you little pieces of information in each of these because the podcast just runs too long if I try to explain it all at once, and then I end up repeating myself anyways. So just these tidbits of information coupled with Jay's experience and progression, and you might actually, you will listen to stuff that is usually not explained in esoteric deliberations. People like to keep things close to the vest, or else they do things more or less how others have done them. These experiments, you might say, they're more than experiments. Those have passed. This is more or less a beta testing for somebody else. I've done this to an extent, but I have so many things under my understanding, so many methods and this and that, that to start from scratch here is just not for me. Although I connect directly with the jinn and the archangels and the angels and everything like that. However, I'd like to stream like this even more for somebody who's done it already or for somebody who has experience in it, so you can instantly call up things. Because what happens here is that once you successfully summon the Jinn, and the success depends on degree of summoning, you can have an instant contact. Just touch the seal, and if you're sensitive, you can feel something, a variation. If you put it under your pillow at night, you might have a dream of sorts. We've done this before with Jay and Tara. The thing is that once they come in, they're going to give you a sign. And the sign is usually an alteration of something that's been bugging you in your life somehow. Either your own energy will fluctuate, either you see a pattern, like Jay said. Oh, I used to identify the Jinn by the patterns. I believe he means patterns of events. There were synchronicities that would happen, that there is a presence here. The Jinn presence is usually of a denser energy. When many Jinn express with a hoarse, gravelly voice, this is what the illusion is. They don't, sometimes they do speak like that, but how much of that is suggestion and expectation? Of course, everything can be expectation, and that's why we craft a narrative, so we can focus our awareness along certain lines where they do come through. But this is a more generalized description. The hoarse, gravelly voice is also about a hoarse, gravelly energy, a lower frequency. And low frequency doesn't mean bad frequency. We like subsonics in our music. We like the low bass tones. They make the music better. You can't just have high notes. So this is the spectrum. And you have the high frequencies and the low frequencies, and you need both of them. Without the low frequencies, the high frequencies just dissipate. They don't. You need a lot of energy to sustain high frequencies at that level, and you just don't have that amount. Whereas the low frequencies act as carrier waves. Without the high frequencies, however, the carrier waves can distort. So you have, and both of them can distort. So they complement each other. And in this case, the angel is not going to interfere, but it keeps things stable, so to speak. And we'll notice that Vahavel, for example, and I'll mention about my modifications to I didn't modify the angels themselves, I just adapted them to these conditions. So the suffix of which angels have a ya suffix, an ending, or which have an L ending, like you can have Gabriel or Gabriah, two different angel names because of the endings, and the endings mean different things. I'll explain that next time a little bit, just tidbits of information. But over here, Baal offers us something, and I'll explain it right after Jay describes his next experience. Okay, Jay, take it away one last time for this podcast.
You had mentioned something about a triangle and a circle, and then project this into your third eye and get a vision of the genie, and bring them into human form and all that sort of thing. Well, I've been doing something similar to that. No triangles or circle or even trying to do anything, but I always have visions of the genies when I just lay down and take a nap during the day. So, and that's what happened with Baal. And after, after that second summoning I did, the following day, I had a vision and a really cool kind of feeling about the whole thing, too. The vision was Baal just ahead, and I looked up the picture later of the head and of a human, and then the toad and the cat, and there's little legs at the bottom of the entity or whatever you want to call it, and so there could have been little legs under this head, but what I mainly saw was just this wavy, energetic spider web underneath the head. So there could have been little legs moving on the web or whatever. And so, and you've said before, he's a web-oriented genie and getting you, teaching about the unseen and the land of the dead and spirit world and that whole thing. So, as I was seeing this vision, I also felt like part of the web. I could just feel myself just going out, but in a real grounded way. I wasn't in an ungrounded way. I mean, and I'm fully awake. Well, I don't really know if I'm fully awake or not, but I'm definitely in an altered state. So I'm conscious though. I can feel my body. I can move, things like that. But I was just in a very calm, meditative state, just laying down. And but again, it's just a head, all right. And I'm like going, oh, come on, turn human. Be something I can relate to, something like that. I'm trying to get him to do that, but that didn't work. Okay, cool, didn't work. He's just not ready. Then a day went by, or maybe I'm not ready. That's probably the case. I'm sure that's the case. So a day went by, and then this afternoon, I had another vision where of a king on a throne. And he had legs. He, had a full body. He changed into one of my familiars. Then he went into changing. Then he had a cowboy hat on, and then he had the king's crown again. And then he was back on the throne. And then at one point he was dancing and all that. And I felt the same vibe, except without the web. Now, what I think, it's not that I don't think that I'm lacking anything. It's just that I think I got used to it. I've kind of absorbed what Ball needed me to absorb to move to the next step, which is a Geraz. So, that's what I'm doing. So anyway, when you get the soundbite, email me anything you think needs to be said, and if not, I'm going to keep moving forward, and there you go. Dr. J out.
So there you have it. Did his summoning, but he didn't banish. He didn't send the Jinn back. He didn't say, go away now. The Jinn just lingered, and that over the course of a few days, it came forward, and like you said, he didn't do the triangle thing or the circle. Yeah, but you did. Even though you didn't visualize it per se, the meaning of the inner eye still was operating. You're in a meditative state, and you're getting into the image of the Jinn as is described. Now, my description of the Jinn, my understanding of the description is that, well, if you really want to bring this particular Jinn in, you have a totem pole effect. You have the three heads representing the top, the middle, and the lower body, the lower aspects. And these all have elemental capacities, qualities, and these elemental qualities then are stimulate the energies. And because Baal is supposed to assist the one who disputes the status quo, you invert the elements, because that disputes the status quo. These are hints. They may seem far-fetched, but they work. However, when Jay visualized the Jinn when he was lying down, he used the classic Colin de Plancy imagery. Colin de Plancy was an illustrator, and he showed the most outrageous Jinn depictions you would ever see, very monstrous. However, he also depicted the goddess Kali as an evil ogre, or the bird of Vishnu, Garuda, the vehicle of Vishnu, as some kind of monster. So he was kind of biased. Even so, these are kind of collectively acceptable things because Baal is associated with a kind of web. Not quite a spider, but the 66 legions represent interconnections. So Baal is an interconnecting. He represents the connections to the underworld. He's also very good if you want to alter your behavior or break habits or get into new habits, open up your perception, because he bestows wisdom and confidence, but he also bestows invisibility. And what does that mean? Well, these all tie together. Invisibility isn't just not being seen, It is being coherent and resonant with the unseen yourself. When you do that, that's why they don't see you, because you're in a kind of different frequency. Your mind is vibrating it's differently. Your awareness is different, and people tune into each other. Yeah, somebody can see you visually easily, but they don't register you. They don't deliberate. Okay, that's this person. That's somebody there, another human being, threat, friend, or foe. Who knows? But they're there. Now, if you instead have a different mood or silence your mind, I mean, a lot of people suggest that. Okay, walk through a crowd without, you know, or be anywhere, and if you quiet your mind completely, then people perceive you less. You register less because that kind of energy is picked up, it's perceived. You're making noise. If you don't make noise, then you're less likely to be seen, so to speak. And if you intend to be blocked, that's even better. Now, there is a vampire in Jay's life. Vampire, energy bleeder, or whatever you want to call it. Um, and this vampire was going through something because the nourishment was taken away, because it couldn't feed on Jay, because Jay disappeared. His energy disappeared. That's how you're invisible. We're talking about the Temple of Solomon as an energy body. So anything that has to do with whatever these descriptions are pertain to the energy body. You don't physically go away. You're not, the photons don't like rub off, avoid you. What happens is that the perception of other people cannot translate the sensation, because it's almost like seeing a tree, or and the tree has its own vibration, its own style of perception. Especially if you're in a crowd, nobody can distinguish your face in a crowd if you don't vibrate your distinct individuality in some way. So that's a good way to avoid people who are hostile, even if they're searching for you. When you tune into the underworld, it's not a bad thing. You're not going to hell. The underworld is not just under the earth, it's the whole thing. It is a whole aspect of the spectrum of terrestrial presence, including the physical body. Part of our body resonates with the underworld all the time. And so when the physical body's gone, whatever's left is tuned into the underworld still. We don't have physical perception, but if we're sensitive and that energy makes noise, like a deceased spirit, for example, or a presence, we will perceive it. Usually they don't make noise. It's so quiet, and our perception is so atrophied and dumbed down that it cannot register without a physical stimulus. So Baal is an initiator. And we will see now, here comes the interesting part. When you try to couple the day Jinn and the night Jinn, because you're also having to summon now the night Jinn angel. And the night and the day aspects of the Decan are different. Part of the Two of Swords with the crossing swords, if you can see the Minor Arcana card, if you can't, I recommend you Google it, look at the image. One of them is the day side, the other one is the night side. That's not all they are. They just, the card represents, okay, reconciling two different things. Not just balancing, but navigating between that zone where they actually touch or where they relate. So all of these things in the realm of the moon, the subconscious, the realm of intuition and feeling and of mystery, come together in a manner where you're learning to navigate through them, because there's paradoxes, there's contradictions. Some things just don't fit. You don't force them to fit. You avoid that rock where they don't fit, and you find a path between them where they reconcile. There is always a path where they reconcile, and Baal teaches that. Baal is the form of that. Agaris is the power that brings that form about. So we're going to be tapping into the earth force with Agaris. And we'll see that next time. You know the score. Please subscribe if you like this, if it's on YouTube. If not, subscribe on Substack if you see it there. And check out the rest of my stuff. I get into some pretty deep occult topics and some contemporary stuff as well with the writings. And I'm working right now on explaining certain yoga methods in ways that I haven't heard them explained quite. And beyond that, we're going to get into other esoteric cultivation, alchemy, but also what you might call magic or manifesting in this manner. But it always has to do with deep symbols and archetypes. Okay. Thanks, Jay, again, for all of your input. I can't wait for your progress with Agaris and how this is going to unfold. This is always real time and raw, folks. So thanks for listening. Magus out.